Great to see everyone here today. I've got about a minute till, but we're going to go ahead and start with some announcements. We need to remember the Conyers family in our prayers. Sister Jackie's father passed away. Funeral is going to be in West Palm Beach, Florida. Charlene is here this morning, but she'll be flying out tomorrow. And her email said she doesn't fly very well, so we need to make sure we keep her in our prayers and the whole Conyers family and the Bazrallis in our prayers. Brother Terry, you got a tune-up this week on his pacemaker. They adjusted the levels on that. So maybe when he gets adapted to that, he'll be feeling quite a bit better. We also need to remember all of those on our sick list, our injured list. Keep the Moody's in your prayers still over the loss of Kevin's father. Yes, ma'am. Good news. And we're now talking about Kevin's mother. Emma. Oh, Emma. Ah, okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. Also, our camera is back up and operating. Anyone wishing to contribute to that, you can either put it in the church collection plate as it goes by with a note in the memo section, and then it'll get to the right person since we had to purchase that outside the treasurer. Anything else we need to know about at this time? Brother Joel, then, would you lead us in a prayer before we begin, please? Amen. We're in chapter 20 in the book of Exodus. Before you open your Bibles, though, I'm going to give you a closed book test. Closed Bible test. Wednesday night, we had gotten down to the fourth of the 10 Commandments, and keep the Sabbath, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And some discussion had been going on, so here's the closed book portion that we're going to look at. Compare and contrast the Sabbath day in the Old Testament and the first day of the week in the New Testament. And I'll give you a head start. We've already, Wednesday night, had agreed that there was no verses in the New Testament that told us to observe a Sabbath day. So, compare, contrast, Sabbath day, first day of the week. What are the similarities between the Sabbath day and the first day of the week, and what are the differences between the Sabbath day and the first day of the week? One Saturday, one Sunday. Why the difference? Why did we go to Sunday in the New Testament? Both set aside in a certain respect, yes, but what makes, yes, okay, 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 okay. Anything else? Bingo. The first day of the week was the day that Christ arose, and that in the New Testament we're told to do certain activities on that day, and the certain activities I want to bring in to show you another, what I consider a major difference between the two. On the Sabbath day, as was said, they were to rest and they were to remember God and the things that God had done, created. What is the first day of the week? What do we set aside to do on the first day of the week? Worship who? And what are we to remember? Jesus' death. The difference is the Old Testament. Now, true, there are some, it's interlaced to a degree. When we worship God, we worship Christ, the Godhead. We're supposed to be Christians 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But when we assemble on the first day of the week, when we break the bread, what are we remembering? Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And that's our part. We take the part in, that's the part we take in our salvation. We remember him, his blood that was shed. And as was stated, nowhere does it tell us that we can't do any work. And I'd even mentioned to Jeremy Wednesday night after class that in the New Testament, Christ even mentioned that, said, who's going to let his ox lay in a ditch and not go out and save the ox on a Sunday? So, and Christ had healed on Sunday. So even though in the New Testament, the first day of the week was set aside to assemble and break bread and take collection and praise God, no restrictions on work, travel, etc. And I had mentioned Wednesday night that I missed the blue laws. And the only reason that I made that comment was that in the day that there was the blue law, people couldn't work and do certain things. Today, without the blue laws, people have just absolutely let what the Memorial Day, the remembering day of Christ is, go to waste. There is so much competition. We, in 2 weeks, in a week now, we're going to get into the praise football. And if you look at the churches around, the different religious groups around, and if you look at the number of them that will change their Sunday night worship to accommodate people getting home to watch football, what is taking precedence? Assembly and worshiping God or football? Priorities are being misplaced, and that's the reason I like back in the old days. And it's very evident if you just look at any surveys out from the 1950s, when 99% of the people believed in God, the God of the Bible, believed in hell and believed in heaven, and you look at it today where 56% of the people believe in the God of the Bible, About 70% will believe in heaven, but only 50-something% will believe in hell. What's happened? Why are we sitting here today with more empty spots than we have filled spots at a worship service? Some people's priorities are in the wrong place. Pardon? Now there's some justifiable, and here again is the point that when it comes to work, there are some people that have to work on Sunday. God understands that. Christ understands that. When a person has the ability and the option to do something different, should they not do something different? If I had an option of I can go work today or I don't have to go work today, and I choose to go work today and miss service, what am I placing first? It's not God. Wrong priority. Years and years ago, let's see, it's been almost 20 years ago when I had a business. The most profitable time for that business was on weekends, including Sunday, because I was in the fishing business, the bait and tackle business. I would not open on Sunday. I closed on Wednesdays at 5:30. I could have hired people, but here's what it is to me anyway, and you may feel totally different. If you do, that's fine. If I have the option, why do I want to pay somebody and encourage them not to attend the service when if I'm just closed, they may or may not, but I'm not interfering with their ability to do it? So to me, that all gets into personal, and I have on occasions had to work on Sundays. Even when I was 15 years old, I occasionally had to work on Sunday. And that was back in the days of the blue law. But I worked at a funeral home, ambulance service, and things happen on Sundays, don't they, Brother Jeremy? You can't say when an accident's going to occur. You got to be there. Any other questions or comments then on the Sabbath day or the first day of the week? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I say, there's jobs where you have to, but if you've got options, if we go to Hebrews 10:25, we're told not to forsake the assembly. So, and that has to do with a will to do something different, not a have to do something different. Yes, sir. Correct. Yes, sir, Brother Jeremy. You call it celebration, which is exactly correct, but it's also a memorial. And I have beat this horse to death also, but we in the United States of America don't remember memorials and do things the way we used to. Memorials used to be you remembered the occasion and what it was all about and talked about it, and now it's used for a holiday. You can take, just take Memorial Day, for instance. How many people really observe Memorial Day and what it's all about versus how many are going to catch out cooking out and fishing and doing other things? Okay, number 5 in the 10 Commandments then is one that we could also spend a week talking about. Honor thy father and thy mother, that the days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. In general, not specific now, but in general, are parents honored today by their children? Pardon? Depends on the family. That's why I said in general and not specific. But to me, everything in the media is encouraging kids not to respect their parents. You look at the commercials that you see on TV today, how many of them do the children appear smart and the parent dumb? And how many of them, parents lie to kids and kids lie to parents in commercials now? But why do you put a child, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they did it right up here in just north of us in Alabama, a car dealership. A kid that's not even old enough to drive, probably can't even spell car yet, but he's out selling cars. Does that make any sense? People like to have their kids in their videos and in their movies and all, but when you have young children selling products that they're not even capable of using, to me, there's something wrong with that. Brother Clarence, you just dying to say something. Absolutely. And you see it everywhere. And it hadn't started just yesterday or day before. This has been going on it actually started back in my generation, back in the 1960s, where people started getting away from authority and things of that nature. But honor thy father and thy mother. That is something that needs to be done. If a young person will honor their father and their mother, what are their odds of them being a good citizen in the United States and respecting authority and surviving and going on that way? My dad was my best buddy, but he was my dad. Yeah, Brother Grant.
be so shunning with them. When you tell them to do something, they're like, wait a minute, that kind of stuff. But then if the kid goes to somebody else's house, and sees them being all buddy, and then they go home and it's like, your parent is acting more like your parents. They're like, well, so-and-so's, parents are more like their friends. And you have to say, well, that's so-and-so's parent, not here.
Who's got the life experience? The 10-year-old or the, be generous, the 30-year-old? Not the 10-year-old. Okay. Anything else then on honor parent?
Because all this whole thing we talked about, this kids become less and less respectful as homes have come apart. It is the father's fault. It's just a fact. It's the father's fault. The Bible tells us that the father, the husband, is the head of the house. No matter, and I know that there are wonderful mothers who have done a great job as single mothers and had to do that. But if you look at the American society and how things are going, when the father's fault, and if the fathers have not learned to Paul said in 1 Corinthians, he said, be strong, be firm in faith, and be men, and do everything that you do in love. So there's a problem with men not relating to their father in the correct way, not relating to God in the correct way, and being good Christian men. And so then they don't have a basis to show their children what fathers should look like. And there's also a selfishness and a laziness, and that it's easier to be a friend to your children than it is to be a parent. It's a lot easier to allow them what they want rather than to give them what they need. And we see God has always been the perfect example of giving us what we need, not allowing us what we want. And that's because of his love for us. So if we have that same love as parents, as fathers, then we give our children what they need rather than allowing them what they want. But a lot of that comes from that first part, being strong, being men, being mature enough to do the hard thing. Men today in our generation is struggling.
If I were teaching the teenage class, I would make this comment. Now, there are exceptions to all rules, remember that. But if I were teaching the teenage class, I would tell those young folks, the people that you are dating and the people that you are looking at to make your partner for life, look how they treat their parent. If they treat their parent well, they will treat you well. If they treat their parents dishonorably, then they're not going to treat you well. As I say, there's going to be some exceptions, but as a general rule, you can put that one in the bank. Any other things on parents? Yes, ma'am. We could embark on a whole different rabbit trail here talking about the women's movements that have been progressing the last few decades, but we're going to move on to the next commandment. Number sixth commandment then is thou shalt not kill. What does now some translations will have a different word than kill there. Anybody got a different translation with a different word than kill? Murder. And that's what the King James, when it says kill, that's the intent, because if you look at all the laws that come after, where it goes in and talks about when things happen and how things happen, it is talking about murder. Right. As we go into the rules, there's the premeditated and there's in today's terminologies, the manslaughters and the reckless endangerments and all that, which the Bible does a good job in separating those and looking at them as to degrees of punishments and things, as we'll get into. But on the core, there are some religious groups that don't believe in going to war. They don't believe in killing of any sort. There's conscientious objectors. If they go strictly by this section here, that's not what that means. Now, I'm going to go just a little bit different route than what Brother Jeremy would on this one, probably, because I want to get into something that's happening in the United States today, where there are states, counties, cities that are having sanctuary cities, protecting certain classes of people, those that have done things illegally. Is that what the Old Testament tells us to do when we get over into sanctuary cities? What was the purpose of a sanctuary city in the Old Testament, Brother Golden? Not guilty. If these places that are looking for sanctuary cities are trying to base it on Bible or on humanity, they're going about it wrong, because the sanctuary cities were to protect those that were not guilty of the manslaughter, the premeditated, it was the accidentals, because they had in place at that time where the nearest of kin, regardless of reason that a person was killed, the nearest of kin could go kill that person. So, and the sanctuary city was set up to protect the innocent, not to protect the guilty. Yes, sir. Look at all the wars that took place. Yeah. Now, the word should, I agree with you, the word would be better translated murder, because that was the intent. Because as we get into the other books that we'll go to a little bit later, and they outline the punishments for the various crimes, it was the murder that was set apart. So, anything else on that one before we get to a really good one? Okay, that was number 6. Number 7 is thou shalt not commit adultery. Plain and simple, isn't it? But I'm not committing adultery today. I'm having a one-night stand. I'm having a fling. But see, Hollywood, 70 years or so ago, Hollywood is the ones that started promoting these, not calling things what they are. You dress it up with a name, an affair. That should be a happy thing, right? So you got to call things what they are. Yes, sir, Brother Cut. Absolutely. Got to call it like it is. Anything else on number 7? That's true. We sometimes complicate it, make it more difficult than it ought to be. Number 9, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I skipped number 8, didn't I? Number 8, thou shalt not steal. Somebody, communication is an exchange of ideas, and we use symbols to have meaning on that exchange of ideas. And we use the language, words are our symbols that we exchange to exchange ideas. But for us to have a good understanding and a good effective communication, we have to have a common understanding of the words that we exchange, right? So, my definition of steal might be different than your definition of steal. So let's just throw it out. What does it mean by thou shalt not steal? What does the word steal mean? In plain, simple English, it's take something that's not yours. Take something that don't belong to you. Take something that you have. Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't have to be big things, does it? In my opinion, and I'm going to make this very, very plain. My opinion, most of the theft that takes place in business today is theft of time. If you look at how many people do everything under the sun at their workplace that is personal nature, that is stealing from the company. When you work for the man, you are supposed to work for the man. Years ago, when I drove a truck for a living, I went to this one place, and this young lady was sitting at the window, and I went in to give her my information that I needed to pick up a load, and she's sitting there on her cell phone. She sees me and she picks up the paper. Never spoke to me. Now, she's the face of the company to the truck drivers. When she's sitting at that window interacting with the truck drivers and the companies that the truck drivers represent, she is the face of that company. What impression of that company did I get when she's there on her cell phone and never even says hi? I'm bothering her. Well, if I'm bothering her, I'm bothering the company. She's sitting there stealing time from that company because she's not doing what she needs to do to promote that company. Like I said, that's just me and a personal gripe I have. But anything else? Yes, sir. And if you carry it out that way, we can extrapolate that if you miss Sunday worship because you want to, not because you have to, you've just taken time from God. You've stolen from God. So, yes, sir. Right. Well, I was doing the accounting work in the Air Force, and I had a favorite phrase when I would go back and people be making mistakes, and all I'd go back and talk to them, and well, we were just so rushed. We didn't have time. And I'd look at them and I'd say, how come you have time to correct something you didn't have time to do the right the first place? If you got time to make corrections, you got time to slow down and get it right the first time. Anything else? We look alike. Never mind. Go. Absolutely. Yeah, generally speaking, the actions of the worker bee is reflective of the atmosphere set by the. All right, we've gotten through the not steal. Now we get down to bear false witness. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Does that mean in a court of law? Not necessarily. We do see occasions where that happens, but I think it gets a little bit more base, excuse me, than that in this. If we just take us as neighbors, as friends, as family, if I go to Jeremy and I say something about Dave that is inaccurate, what have I done? Have I not borne false witness against Dave, put him in a bad light with Jeremy? That's one reason why, especially in the church, as we go through, we're admonished not to gossip and backbite and all, because gossip can kill a congregation. Gossip can kill a neighborhood. Gossip can damage a family. We are supposed to do everything humbly and with honor. And when we're dealing with neighbors, we have to be just as forthcoming and upright. And who is our neighbor? Everybody we come in contact with is our neighbor. Number 10, then, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's. I'm sorry? Yes, ma'am. I agree with that, but I also think that a lot of times people will tell that half truth to make themselves look better than the other. And when I grew up, my folks taught me that half a truth is a whole lie. Because if you tell half a truth that shades it this way and you don't tell this part, people can get the wrong idea and be led the wrong direction based on that. So when you're dealing with that, you need to be 100% forthright with accuracy. We don't gonna get in the government today. I hadn't got 3 weeks to talk about it, so we're not gonna go there today. Number 10 then is not covet. What does it mean by not covet? But Dave, you've got a real nice looking car. I think I will. Is that covet? What is covet then? There you go. I want it, you can't have it type situation. I've used this phrase before, but I love the way my wife puts things sometimes. Well, most of the time. Am I out of trouble now? Dave, I wish I had that, but you had a better one. There you go. It's not to take something from somebody, it's to, and that's all covet is. And covetousness leads to what? The one that we just talked about, stealing. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am going to skip the rest of chapter 20, because it's talking about how the Lord talked to Moses and give instructions to him and passed on down. And we're going to pick up with 21 because there's a section that I wanted to get to. And I'm not going to have time to get very deep into it, so that'll be your job Wednesday night. But what we're dealing with is the judgments that thou hast set before them, and we're going to talk about slavery. And I'm going to kick this off and then let Brother Jeremy finish up with it Wednesday night. But when we think of slavery, when it's talking about buying and selling here in the Old Testament, when we today think about slavery, what do we automatically think about? The slave trade, where the slaves had zero rights. It was a lifetime bondage. And in the Old Testament, when we're looking at this, it is totally opposite that. You see, back in the Old Testament, there could be slaves because they were run into hard times and sold themselves into slavery. But at the end of 6 years, what happened? They're now free. It wasn't a lifetime thing. We look at some other situations where they were captured in war and things of that nature, and they're sold into slavery. But let's just see how far we can get before Brother Jeremy has to pick it up. Verse 2, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. Now, even though this says he, when we can look at some later verses in Deuteronomy, etc., it would apply to both male and female. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. In slave trade in America, it didn't matter. Or children, they would separate and everything else, but here it's keeping them together, and it's a property. It's if he came in by, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, I'm going to bring up something that's going to be unpleasant for some of you, most of you. It is factual history. But back in the 1960s, when there was segregation and people started talking about, at that time they used the word integration. They was talking about doing away with segregation. There were some people who went to the Bible and tried to use the Bible to justify the slavery that was taking place in America and the separation of the equal but separate phases. That's a shock to you, right? But that's a fact. That's where they misunderstand the Bible and don't see the differences between the two. The Bible does not, never did, condone slavery the way it had been in the 15, 16, 17, 18, 1900s. Yep. Absolutely. I wish I'd had more time on this section, but Brother Jeremy can pick it up there, and we're getting behind. I should have done 3 chapters and didn't hardly get through the one half. So thank y'all for your comments and your attention.